I think there's a lot that people can learn from looking at other industries and their successes and failures, because 99.9% of products are not going to simply spread virally on their own.
The product and the service that you're trying to sell, you need to find the place where your ideal customer, sits, right? Where they spend most of their time, right? And he's going to be, Welcome to another episode of Genie Talks Show. Folks, my name is Bilal Asif and I'm your host for this episode today. Today's topic is very close to my heart because we're going to be talking about the pain that I believe every Bootstrap founder feels along their startup journey. And that is how to market their product when they have limited or low resources. I'll be honest that I ask this question to myself almost every day because I'm also a founder of a Bootstrap startup, Connect Genie. And frankly, I've not been able to figure out how to, fix that. So I'm very fortunate that I got to meet Conor Brondson, who is a product marketing wizard. Hello. So he's going to be sprinkling some really practical tips that I think we all can learn from and hopefully implement in our startup journey. A little bit about Conor is that he is currently a director of marketing and communication at LinearB, which is a B2B startup. What astonished me about Conor the most was that when he joined LinearB, he re-strategized their marketing budget in a way that he was able to save them $500,000 US. I don't know how you did that, but we would really ask you to tell us in this podcast today. And what also amazed me about Conor was that he has spent most part of his career managing political and fundraising campaigns. So then he decided that he now wants to disrupt the tech sector. He joined a tech startup and swung his wand and saved them a whooping $500,000. So Conor, first of all, thank you for taking the time for being at this podcast. How are you doing today?
It's my pleasure, Bilal. Thank you so much for having me on. I don't know if I can live up to this amazing intro, but I really appreciate you having me on the show and excited to hopefully share some insights with your audience. I think there's a lot that people can learn from looking at other industries and their successes and failures. And so I think that's a great topic for us to dive into a bit. And I can speak to some of my experience and how we've approached it at LinearB.
Definitely. So Conor, but before we dive into the actual subject, right, I'm really curious to know that, about your career shift, that you were, managing political campaigns and then you pivoted towards moving towards the technology sector. Just curious to know, how did this happen? What was this shift like and what motivated you?
Sure. So, I've always been interested in technology. Like when I was growing up, I helped build computer labs in a variety of countries around the world as a nonprofit work. I grew up coding websites quite badly, I should mention, for RuneScape clans that I won, that I ran growing up. So I've always, had my finger in there. I did some computer science classes, but ended up majoring in political science because I've also always been passionate about how kind of technology in the world shifts over time. And it led me into this interesting startup space within politics, which is political organizing, political campaigns. And I think what most people don't realize is that every campaign that you're helping to manage, every time you are raising a candidate up, it is basically building a founder brand. It's saying, okay, what's the B2C brand we're going to build around this founder? But instead of a business, it's a candidate. It's a campaign. It's policies. And I really saw this shift happening where technology was deeply disrupting how the kind of traditional methods of political organizing happened. And I started working with more and more businesses on that front. After helping elect some folks like Pramila Jayapal, current member of Congress, I started working with some blockchain companies. I started working with some more traditional companies, and ended up taking a contract with Microsoft and working with them on their content strategy, basically serving as a translator between subject matter experts and the field and executives. But what I realized is I always missed this kind of excitement of startups. It's one of the things that I loved about that political campaign side of things was okay, we're building something from the ground up. We have to build infrastructure out. We have to recruit, train, create new workflows. And so I was really excited to join LinearB 3.5 years ago and kind of take on their content strategy and help them reimagine how they could communicate with developers. And as a very bad dev myself, like I said, like it's mostly web development and some badly done Python. Thank God for all the coding tools that are coming in today with Gen AI, because it's really helping bad devs like myself get a little better. I've been able to like make a big impact there and help them realign their strategy. But I believe there's so much like this underlying idea between startups and other industries. I think we undervalue in tech sometimes the understanding you can get and the clarity you can get from industries that are missing parts. And then when you come to tech, you see the things that are there that were not available in other industries, and it gives you this opportunity to improve.
Sure. Right. So from what I've heard so far, I think that you've leveraged a lot of your previous experience in the tech domain as well. I think you also agree with that, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I spent over 3 years working with Microsoft and other Fortune 500 companies, almost 4 years there, and now 3.5 years at LinearB. And I'm shortly joining, maybe before this episode comes out, actually, AI startup Galileo. And really excited to head developer awareness there and communicate with millions of developers around the world about how to get your AI into production and have it be safer, more efficient. So super excited to dive into that more. And I think one of the really exciting things about startups and one of the really exciting things about tech in general is if you take the right roles, you're going to continually learn and grow. And that's something that I would also kind of attach back to that kind of political campaign background, is this idea of you need to be a self-starter, you need to grow processes around, you need to scale yourself and your candidate and your founder. And it's something that I really admire about the approach you're taking, which is you're saying, look, like I'm thinking about personal branding. How can I scale my founder brand? How can I create content that speaks to the value of what I'm doing and speaks to my audience? And I think you're taking a very smart approach on it, as I think we'll probably discuss.
Yeah. So, one thing that I would like to ask you is that, a lot of startups are mostly led by, tech founders, right? Engineers who have, identified a problem, they knew how to code and they built an MVP, but they do not usually have any marketing background, right? They do not even understand marketing like myself. It's a total mess at my end as well. So I would like you to give us some advice at how does this engineer founder should start their product marketing journey when they have launched their startup.
Yeah, so I think engineers at our core, we consider ourselves problem solvers. Even as a bad engineer, I consider myself a problem solver. And the thing that is kind of a transition is you also have to add this storytelling element, this idea of like, okay, I've solved the problem. How do I communicate that problem and the value of solving it to other folks? Because I think we see other products where it's just obvious, like, oh, like I tried this thing, the product's going to solve this for itself. And we have to kind of get away from that belief, because 99.9% of products are not going to simply spread virally on their own. Typically, people have to understand the problem space, understand what it's solving. And even if you are the target audience for that, let's say you're an engineer who's building dev tools like we have at LinearB, where we're helping solve engineering teams' problems, helping them automate, helping them understand where there are challenges in their workflows. Even when you're doing that for other engineers, there are differences of opinion about what you're solving, how you want to solve it, how to approach it. So that shift in your head needs to be, hey, like I need to help explain this to the world. And that's why I really believe there's this incoming focus for startups on founder-led brands. You're seeing it across multiple different industries. You're seeing it in a variety of startups that are successful, where the founder becomes positioned as an expert and creates content around their expertise. They share it with the world, and the people who match that persona. So let's say an example of LinearB, we're talking to VPs of marketing, directors of marketing. Both of our founders are former VPs of VPs of engineering. We're talking to VPs of engineering, and they're both former VPs of engineering themselves. And they are going out there and having these conversations with other VPs of engineering, creating content about it. That's why we have this podcast, Dev Interrupted, that I've been one of the co-hosts on for almost 4 years now, and why our co-founder Dan Lyons was the original co-host and has kind of like led that production the whole time, because he can understand the problems that other founders and other VPs of engineering, directors of engineering like yourselves are having, and he can go out there and communicate with them, have these conversations, and then from there, my job as someone who's kind of developing the content structure and workflows around them is to make sure that that content gets its way into LinkedIn, it gets its way onto our Substack, and gets out over email, and find the right channels to repurpose that content and share his expertise and grow his brand. And I think you're doing a great job of that yourself by communicating with your audience and getting it out there and positioning your expertise.
Yeah, I mean, my startup is mostly about personal branding, but in your case, like your founders, they were also VP of engineers, and they also it should be assumed that they had a tech background, solid tech background.
Yes,
I
very
guess,
much
right? So, did they ever communicate to you that or did you ever feel that developers and marketing people, they have a very different mindset? So, how did they transition? I hope that you also agree with that, right?
Yeah, I won't pretend that it's not hard sometimes, particularly as you reposition audiences. Like it's a lot easier for founders who are building a tool for marketers to market to marketers. So marketers are very used to that. They're thinking about it. Whereas I think engineers, like we talked about it, are problem solvers. They are looking for technical depth. They are looking for different things, and you have to kind of reimagine how you want to position yourself with your target market, depending on who you're communicating with. In the case of software engineers, okay, how can we help position our product expertise? How can we share technical depth? How can we share amazing case studies that showcase how other engineering teams have leveraged us? How can we give folks the opportunity to play around with either a free version or a sandbox so they can really test and iterate on it? And also, how can we demonstrate that we understand their challenges? Because I think too many engineers have been marketed to by folks who don't actually understand their challenge. And so they are eager to hear from other engineering leaders and other folks who have been there, who have built products themselves, who have done day-to-day coding, and see that, yes, there are too many meetings. Yes, the PR process is a problem, and can understand their pain points and empathize with them and learn from them.
Yeah. So what I've learned throughout the tenure of my professional career is that, the product and the service that you're trying to sell, you need to find the place where your ideal customer, sits, right? Where they spend most of their time, right? So any advice that you can give, that how should one find their target audience for their, startup from the beginning?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is, even if you are yourself that target audience, so to keep leaning on this LinearB example, former VPs of engineering, they're selling to VPs of engineering, directors of engineering, you may not actually understand where your customer spends all their time. You may be a different niche. You may be not within that in group. So you can't just assume that because you're a dev and you're pitching a tool to devs, you automatically know where they're spending their time. You have to do your research. You have to go out there and actually study, like, okay, where are developers spending their time? You have to look for the deepest internet communities. You have to ask your ideal customers. You should hopefully get in some design partners early on and say, hey, where are you spending your time? Where are you finding information? But the honest answer is that things have really changed over the last several years. It used to be that, executives at B2B companies were mostly discovering things somewhat online when they were marketed to, but often it was, trade shows that were really driving where the industry was, 10, 15 years ago. And you would go to a trade show, you'd see several different solutions, you'd come back, you'd have these ongoing conversations with sales. And that trend was already going away. We were seeing the shift into online communities, into online content. That's been going on for quite a while, but it was really accelerated by COVID as we were all trapped in our homes and folks had to transition to working remotely. Online communities have become much more important. And it's not just, general Twitter. It's not just, or X as you call it now. It's not just like, hey, what are you seeing in your LinkedIn feeds? Those are great places to participate and create content and build a following, build an audience. It's also niche communities. So take marketing, for example. There's the Exit 5 community for CMOs and product marketers. That's a niche, invite-only paid community where people talk about marketing challenges. There are similar communities for platform engineering. There are similar communities for devs more generally. There's also places like Reddit where there's ongoing conversations like this. So I would say, identify where your target audience spends their time, identify where they're being influenced. It's often these niche communities. It's often, these deep audiences. Like, for example, you may be following someone like Luca Rossi at refactoring.fm and his Substack and reading that regularly. People have started to gravitate towards people who have created online databases of content, who have created online audiences, and also these niche communities that rotate around them. And I think we really underrate the impact of the influence within those communities. It's hard to be intentional, developing your own community sometimes. It's a worth trying in many cases. But often what you need to be doing is getting your audience interested in you and in your expertise and letting your own content and influence spread and create echo chambers within these other communities that have already evolved.
That's interesting, because my next question is quite related to this fact that let's suppose that we found some social media platforms or communities that where we can market our product and talk about our product. Right now there is a considerable chance that that the founder that solved the problem through the startup might not have subject authority in that particular area. His personal brand might not be projecting these details about the problem that he's trying to solve. Right, for example, in my case, my before Connect Genie, my profile used to project, my personal brand used to project that I am a software engineer, I'm a founder of a software development services company, Kickbits, and full stack development, Chrome extension development, all these things, right? But now that my product Connect Genie, it's all about personal branding, helping people build their personal brand, right? So I did not have any subject authority. My personal brand on LinkedIn did not have any, was not projecting any sort of these details. So, any advice that you can give that how this engineer, tech founder, or would be able to project his personal brand, position his personal brand in a way so that the community to which where he's sharing the content could see him as someone that this guy actually deeply knows about the problem that he has solved through this startup of his.
Yeah, I think there are a variety of strategies for this. I will say it's one of the big advantages of companies that have a founder who has lived and breathed the problem. And it's why I think you see a lot of VCs and others invest in companies where someone has had that problem and they're now solving a problem they've had. That subject matter expertise that comes with it is valuable both on the product side and also on the marketing side, because you can help project that influence, as you said. I think what you're doing is very intelligent, which is you are creating content about personal branding. You are talking not only about being a founder and a developer, but also like how do you build influence? And I think the honest answer is like the number one thing you can do is create content on the internet today that speaks to your target audience. And it's going to depend where you're going to create content, what type of content you're going to create will depend on, what company you're running, who you're targeting, how you want to set things up. But with the way AI workflows have rapidly evolved, you can do things like start with a podcast or video series and then repurpose that into blogs that you use for SEO, repurpose that into micro content that goes out on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can repurpose that into short form video content that maybe ends up on TikTok, could be also on LinkedIn, could be on YouTube Shorts. And when you can create this like foundational content with depth that you can kind of apply elsewhere, you have a huge opportunity to repurpose that and spread it through a multitude of channels, whether those are paid or organic. So I think that's really how you should think about founder-led brand is like, okay, how can I create foundational content, whether that's a research report, whether that's video, whether that's podcast, it'll depend on what you want to do and your target market. But I would start from those first principles, because the more you can do to position the founder and the company as experts, the more trust you engender with others who are looking to buy your solutions. And the more you will have this echo chamber effect that is created with other people share your content. It's great to bring in folks like, for example, in software development tools, like DevRels are a great option to help you spread and scale that. But a DevRel will also leave eventually. And, they may take another job in a couple of years, and you kind of will lose that part of your brand. So starting with the co-founders, starting with the founders is really the right approach, I think, where you can maintain and develop that brand around them, and then have other pieces like myself who come in to support that in different areas.
Like hiring some consultation, some outside help for the personal branding projection, right?
Yeah. So for example, I'm joining Galileo here, shortly after this interview, in a couple of weeks. Again, I don't know when this interview is going to publish, but I may already be there when this actually goes live. And I'll be leading developer awareness there and helping build our team of dev evangelists. But the people who I'm really trying to shape the brand of the company around are going to be our founder, who's, a former AI engineer at Google. Our other founders are former AI engineer at Uber. Like these folks who really understand the problem space. And for me, it's about helping them get their voice out, supporting them with like in-depth content, research, data, and helping spread that knowledge across a variety of channels. And I think that's where folks like yourself have a huge opportunity. Like I know you say you don't think of yourself as someone who's like built a deep personal brand, but you're a founder, you're a software developer, and you're now someone who's creating content. Like that is a great position to be in as a founder on the internet. And I think there's still so much opportunity. I think a lot of folks see how many podcasts are, how many people are creating content, and they're like, oh, I can't do that, or I don't want to spend my time on that. I'd rather work on product. I'd rather go problem solve in a way that is more natural to me. But if you don't solve the problem of distribution, if you don't solve the problem of awareness for your company, you will not win against companies that are actually solving that problem.
Understood. So when I did the beta launch of Connect Genie, right, I thought that I will talk to my about my product on LinkedIn because it was quite deeply related with LinkedIn, right? So I thought that I will start getting user quickly. I even imagined that then when I'll launch for the first time, my servers will go down with the influx of requests or not, and that did not happen actually. But I quickly realized that that just talking about your product is not sufficient. But I could have not done much more, right? Because I did not have any funding. I used to fund this startup from my own pocket. I could not spend too much on ads. I could not spend hire influencers. They charge a lot of money as well. So all these things, they require a lot of money. So this is the very, very important question: that how do you propose that a founder with zero or low budget should strategize that what and how they need to spend their marketing budget? This is very important.
Yeah, we talked earlier about finding where your customers live, where they spend their time online, where they spend their time in general. And I think that is kind of step one. I think you're right to think of LinkedIn as that spot. It's a product for LinkedIn. It's where people are communicating about it. And kind of the next step for you as a founder, given how busy you are, is to figure out how to batch your content and make it repeatable. So let's say you are focusing on LinkedIn posts. You should not be spending time on LinkedIn posts every day. You should be spending time on LinkedIn posts in a focused burst. You're spending, 2 or 3 hours one day knocking out a bunch of LinkedIn posts, and then those are scheduled out for the next several weeks. Or an example of like a newsletter, which I advise a lot of founders can be a great option for you because you can have someone ghostwrite part of it from your ideas. You can share with a writer or an AI agent if you can set up a good one. You can say, hey, look, here's my bullet points. Here's what I'm seeing in the industry. Here's what I'm thinking about. Let's analyze these different research papers related to what we're doing. And you could have like a repeatable newsletter that becomes a regular content nurture for folks, and that you can then share bits of on LinkedIn, feeding back to that. So that's like a strategy you could approach to kind of build those first 1,000 true fans that will then go evangelize that product for you if done right. So that's how I would think about it is, first of all, identify where your target audience is. Secondly, figure out how you can batch your content. And third, figure out how you can repurpose your content and spread it in the right channels.
Understood. So this is, when you're not spending any money, right? Let's suppose that if you have some ability that now you can, spend some money, right? So on your marketing department. So what should be the first focus? Like, should SEO be a preference, or performance marketing should be a preference, or influencer marketing should be a preference?
I don't think you can say one strategy is the right strategy for every company, but I think what you can do is think through what's the right strategy for your company. So let's take Content Genie, for example, or Connect Genie, for example. If you think your target audience is on LinkedIn, that's where they're spending their time, that's where they're having communications. My advice for you initially would be, okay, how can you create content on LinkedIn 5 to 7 times a week? How can you have content that not only positions you as a thought leader, but also drives back to your product? It doesn't have to be the first time someone consumes content from you, but after the first or second time they could see content from you, they should become aware of your product and start thinking about, oh, maybe I should use it. This person's successful. I see them here. So in your case, maybe the answer is this podcast, right? Where it's, hey, I can do a couple podcasts a month or one a week. And from that, I can do multiple video clips that I can create posts for me every week on LinkedIn. Or maybe the answer is we're going to take this, we're going to feed this into a GPT that we've set up that's going to create an SEO blog about product marketing and founder-led marketing for startups. We'll then publish that on our website. We'll then share that on LinkedIn. We'll also share video clips on LinkedIn. So I would think of it as like, what are the main content pieces that you want to then break out into multiple channels? Because ideally, this will make your marketing funnel much more efficient. And I don't think you should say SEO, performance marketing, one or the other. Though I will generally say that if your budget is still limited from a marketing perspective, I would focus on a content first strategy where people become aware of you, of your product, where you get organic traffic, whether it's from SEO, whether that's from LinkedIn, or whether that's from influencers talking about your product. I wouldn't focus on the performance marketing side. It can get really expensive really quick. And once you have Google Ads up and running, for example, and it becomes this like main source of income for you, it can be really challenging to wean yourself off that later. And it's really easy for your budget to balloon as more competitors get in the space. So I would just be careful about when you start that. In the example where you are focusing your time on LinkedIn, like you, I think, have been doing, if you started to get some budget and you're like, hey, look, I've started to do some content repurposing, but maybe I don't have the time or resources to do that in-house right now. You can look at external contractors who can help you with it. And then you could also look at adding some LinkedIn ad spend as something where it's like, hey, is this scalable for me? I'm already having some success on LinkedIn. Should I boost posts more just so they are seen more by an audience? Should I do sponsored DMs? Those can work really well, especially if you have them be a gift card incentive aligned to them. Or should you be spreading your podcast more with a tool like Letter Drop, where you can not only automate content, likes, and comments, but also automate outreach about a topic? There's a lot of options here, but I would say like lean into the channels where your audience is spending time and figure out how to make things efficient, because you don't want to increase the human-led effort for you. You want to have automation in place when possible, whether that's through AI or something more traditional like Zapier. And you want to have content that spreads in a way where it's not just, oh, I wrote a blog, I shared it once. It's a blog that becomes multiple pieces of social content. Maybe it becomes a video clip. And I'll say the other thing you need to think about is starting video first. I think a lot of B2B companies in particular are really thinking about the written word first. And while that's extremely powerful still in B2B, and I'm very pro research reports and these other things, ignoring video as a key channel is a mistake, because it's where more and more people are consuming their content. It often is getting boosted by platforms. And it's right now harder to go from the written word to video than it is to go from video to the written word. So even if you're going to create like an in-depth research report, for example, let's say you're scaling your B2B marketing team, you have this massive research report you've created, I would say, great, you need to do a webinar about that then maybe gets posted on your podcast. And not only is that an opportunity to bring people in as leads to go watch the webinar, and then you can have it on demand later, but you can then take pieces of that webinar talking about the report out into small clips. Yeah.
And you can repurpose it. So basically, if like or with people with low budget startups, right, they need to focus upon creating the content first themselves. Once they are able to, then they can, if they not able to find time, then they can hire contractors who can do the ghostwriting for them, right? Start from yourself, and then go towards the performance marketing at a very later stage if you are able to afford it, because you're saying that that's quite expensive. It should be a low priority for the beginners, right?
I mean, it's great to do performance marketing because it is pouring gasoline on the fire, but it becomes much more efficient when you have a big fire going already. So if you think of the content as a fire, like if you can get a good bonfire going and you pour gasoline on it, it's going to be much more effective. It's going to stay lit longer than if you have a smaller fire. And the gasoline's a lot more expensive than finding some sticks and logs that you then pile up and get people involved in. So yeah, I think frankly, not just low budget startups, but I think every startup needs to be taking a content first approach. It's just simply how people consume information today. The internet is so important in our lives. We're getting more and more content created with AI agents. And if you are not in that game of creating content in some respect, you are missing out on an opportunity.
Understood. All right. So the last question that I have is about that. It's a kind of a request that if you can walk us through the great achievement of your career that you had, that you saved LinearB almost $500,000 in their marketing budget. What was because this can be a very nice case study that I can learn from, and I think the audience, Bootstrap founders, can also learn from.
Yeah, I think most of our listeners would agree that you need to adapt our business strategy to changing conditions in the market. And
Mm-hmm.
COVID was a major change to the market. Like we've talked a bit about, we saw this transition from in-person marketing at third-party events to even more consumption in digital communities, even more consumption in digital channels. And I've been a big believer in that switch for years before that. That was a lot of my work at Microsoft from 2018 onwards, was how can we create digital content that then supports in-person activations and is consumed by our buyers in channel. And this trend was only accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic and by the changes that pushed the world with remote work being prioritized. And it hasn't gone back to this. We're still, going into the office to sit on Zoom meetings often. We're still consuming content on our social channels in these other areas through email newsletters. And one of the decisions that was really hard for us as a company to make, and one of the ones that I had to push for, is cutting back on third-party events. Third-party events can work really well for you once you have that fire going, once you have a lot of things running. But the honest answer is that if you are a startup that is limited in budget, and it's no longer the heyday of 2020 when everyone was getting funded as much as they wanted to, you have to consider, what are my best ROI channels? What's giving me the most value? And we built a really strong podcast with Dev Interrupted. We have 18,000 plus people who have been consuming our newsletter for that every week. We have, great work happening on our social channels. We have some awesome research papers happening, and we're still spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on third-party events. And what we realized was, while they were valuable, that money would be better spent on scaling out our online content operations into having more funding happening on LinkedIn, having, pouring more fire on things that were working already, or pouring more gasoline, I should say, on things that are working already. So when we have a fire going on LinkedIn because a post is doing well, great, let's boost it. Let's get this report out to thousands more people online. And we didn't see that in-person third-party events were going to have as much impact as that. It's something we'd like to add back in the future. I think if the funding is there, if there's the opportunity to spread it, because there is value to it, but it is not the channel where people are making decisions for dev tools anymore. And so we made this switch to focusing more on online content. We not only saved over $500,000 in our marketing budget in 2023 at LinearB, and I was super happy to lead that effort and cut some of these programs. But we also were able to, over the next 6 months, increase our average deal size by 40% by hyper targeting on enterprise, something that's much more able to be done online than it is at an in-person event where you're not sure who you're talking to always. So we lowered the cost of acquiring customers. We increased our followers on digital channels. And we also were able to increase the average deal size that we had by retargeting by these motions. And it let us really focus on being more efficient online and improving our brand. It gave us time to do entire brand refresh for LinearB, which another accomplishment with which I'm extremely proud. We had an amazing team effort there. And yeah, I think it was a hard decision for us to kind of cut back on something that was working and say, look, we need to prioritize things that are going to work for us better long term and that scale better.
Understood. All right. I mean, this is a great strategy. You actually focused on something that started working for you. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I think the social media, it's the era of social media, and you need to take it very seriously as compared to spending, on going on events and stuff like that. So I agree.
And I will say, I think it's really, I should be really clear. This is third party events. We're still LinearB is still doing first party events. There's executive dinners that we're hosting that are very high value because they are more targeted towards execs at enterprises. They're more targeted towards generating pipeline. It's not, hey, let me talk to 200 people in a day and hopefully some of those things work out. And that's where I think, as a startup, understanding that you need to be hyper targeted often, and you want to build influence in particular areas, not always just broadly, because it is cheaper to do it in specific areas and say, look, I'm going to target this community that matters to my audience. And that broad influence you're going to build is more of a long-term challenge for you. Whereas it may be different with a B2C brand where you have a broader audience, we have more folks. But with B2B companies, like LinearB, where you are saying, hey, I need to talk to engineering executives. I need to talk to engineering leaders. Those are the folks you need to talk to. It's really easy to spread your dollars too thin instead of focusing in and saying, okay, how can we particularly talk to this audience?
Understood. All right. I think I've taken a lot of your time, and thank you for all these answers. I think I really enjoyed it, and I think I got to learn a lot, and I'm hopeful that the audience will also. I hope that you also got to enjoy the conversation.
I had a great time, Bilal. Thank you so much for having me on the show. And for anyone who's listening, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Conor Brondson or conorbronson.substack.com, where I do occasional writing and quite a bit of content creation. So would love to hear from anyone who's listening to the show, hear some feedback, and thanks so much for having me on.
I will definitely, link all your, socials on the description where we will, upload it, and I'll make sure of that. Thank you so much. All right, Conor, thank you so much for for being with us today, and thank you, audience, for listening to us. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bilal.